Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today in our webinar. My name is Greg Malakane. I'm Vice President of Marketing and Customer Success here at Endowment Solutions. We're really happy to have you join how to take the complexity out of Syteline business integration with Salesforce. It's certainly near and dear to us, and those of you that are joining are in that Syteline world, and we hope we can give you some insight today as to how we can help you progress any integration plans that you have. We know your time is very important, and we're grateful to have you join us today. And before we even start the presentation, I'd like to first of all thank the Sun user group for helping us promote this webinar, and a couple of additional notes that the group would like us to pass on to you. You can certainly go out to the SytelineUserNetwork.com website, but keep in mind there's some special pricing going on for memberships now through the middle of July, I believe, and you can take advantage of that. It'll be good through the end of the year. And they're back next year in Orlando, March 28th to the 30th. We hope to be able to meet and greet everybody face to face. It was a disappointment last year to miss out on the conference, but we'll be back in Orlando next year. Fingers crossed on that one. And one other note of thanks to the Jitterbit Software Company. The first 40 attendees today will qualify for a $25 DoorDash gift card sponsored by Jitterbit. We've been a partner of Jitterbit for the last 5 years, and you'll note that our Duet360 product is built on the Jitterbit platform. They are the middleware component of our solution. So thank you very much, Jitterbit. We really appreciate your support. And once we have all the registration complete, those of you that registered first, the first 40 will receive a coupon from us to the email address that you've submitted. Thank you. All right. Well, let's get into it here. Let's talk about the panel, and let me do some brief introductions. Of course, you know my name is Greg Malakane. Martin Monkevich is our VP of Sales from Endowance. Martin has been in the industry for 30 years in the manufacturing industry in leadership positions, primarily sales and business development. He's been with Endowance for the last year, and prior to that was a customer. So he's pretty familiar with what Endowance has to offer. We're certainly happy to have Martin on the management team, and glad to have him presenting today with us. I'd also like to introduce Maria Smirnova. Maria is probably the longest standing member of the Endowance team on the call today. Will be celebrating her 8-year anniversary coming up here shortly. Maria has a really interesting background. She's been in delivery and development for several years prior to joining the sales team as an account executive. I believe you'll see her experience come through when she makes her presentation and adds all those little technical details that everybody on the call probably wants to know more about. So thank you, Maria. Welcome. And of course, our special guest is Chris Arthur. You probably know him. He's been a member of the Sun user group for quite some time. He's been in leadership positions with that group on the board. He's been a customer of Endowance for a while now, so we're really thrilled to have Chris on the team. And as you know, he's VP of Global Enterprise Apps at JBT, a pretty central role to defining user requirements and understanding how they come together in a business efficient manner. Chris is also a member of our customer advisory board, and we're grateful to have his input on an ongoing basis on the CAB team. So thank you, Chris, for being part of this webinar today. So before we get into the meat of the topic, brief update on the agenda. So I'm going to speak a little bit about Endowance. Now, those of you that know us, this may be we may be reviewing things that you're very familiar with, but others of you that don't have any familiarity with us, I'd like to point out some of the highlights of our recent history, which I think you'll find interesting. And then Martin's going to cover market trends which are important to us and help influence our direction, our product roadmap direction. I think you'll find that part of the agenda pretty interesting. Maria will then just get into some of the nitty-gritty, the OneOffice Duet360 components, some of the design aspects, take it under the covers a little bit, so you can have a bit of a deeper understanding of what we offer in our product. And then, of course, Chris is going to step up and talk about how he's using Endowance, the Endowance Solutions product, OneOffice Duet360, and the benefits he's seeing from that product and the integration there at JBT. And of course, we'll follow that up with some Q&A. So hopefully you'll find the agenda free flowing, and I would encourage you to send your questions in as you have them, or you can hold them till the end of the presentation, and we'll address them at that time. All right, well, let's kick this off. So let's talk about Endowance, who we are. Endowance was founded in 2007 by a husband and wife team, the Heinekamps. Both have deep expertise in the CRM world. Both worked for Siebel at one time with experience in other CRMs. And that business influence, excuse me, that business consulting influence has been a central thread in how we interact with customers, how we discover with customers, and in our product development. In 2011, we opened up our European office in Amsterdam. We now have 3 developers at that site, and they help us better serve the North American market, as well as extending into the European marketplace, where we have several customers today. In 2012, we partnered up with Infor, and at that time, kind of earned the right to be their go-to when integrations were a requirement from their customers. That was an important building block to getting to where we are today. And of course, a lot of experience in the Infor ERP world, and now other ERPs, but 2012 was a milestone for the company as we moved forward into the product arena. 4 years later, in 2016, we launched OneOffice Duet360. And I think what you'll see is our focus has pretty much been in the manufacturing and distribution arena. Many of the processes and development that's gone into that product has been based on our business experience in manufacturing and distribution. We're thrilled to be able to serve that marketplace, and I think even today, more than 80% of our customers are from that industry. By 2019, we hit a really important milestone in our history, with more than 400 Salesforce projects under our belt, and slightly more than 40% of those were including an integration. That's pretty significant, as that's where our expertise really lies. Today, I think you'll find that more than 90% of our projects involve an integration of one kind or another. And I say that primarily with Duet360, but of course we integrate to primarily Salesforce and your ERP back office, but also the other components or the other applications offered by Salesforce. We also integrate those platforms as well. So pretty significant milestone that we're very proud of. And in 2020, OneOffice Duet360 exceeded 1 million hours of uptime. Why that's important to you? It's a very reliable product with hardly any disruption of service that's related to the product itself. Now, I'm going to beat my chest a little bit on that, because that's a true statement. And I can say that integrations are always complex, and we know that data and other aspects of an environment can impact an integration in production time and otherwise. But I think you can have a lot of confidence in the fact that Duet360 is a very credible and reliable product in the integration world today. And then today in 2021, OneOffice Duet360 for IIoT was introduced to the market. We're really excited about this product. As you know, the digital transformation that's going on in the market space today is significant. IIoT is front and center of a lot of that development. And what I'd also like to emphasize is we've been going through the last couple of years of transitioning from a consulting company to a product company. That's a pretty significant accomplishment. But we don't give up our business expertise. We carry that forward into the projects that we participate in. And I think that adds extreme value to any customer scenario. Well, Martin, market trends, if you could pick it up from here and kind of guide us into what's happening in the marketplace today.
I appreciate that, Greg. Thank you for the nice review of our history. And good morning to everybody, or good afternoon. Great to see you or meet you guys. Market trends. One of the things we meet with Gartner on a regular basis, and there are some very broad-based trends that we are seeing in the business world, in particular in manufacturing and distribution. And we'll review several of these broad trends. First off, digital transformation. That's a very, very big component of what's going on in our world. We see it everywhere as individuals, consumers. We see it constantly. It is very much in the business world now as well. In B2B, it has literally exploded. E-commerce channels are becoming extremely important for many manufacturers, especially as the newer buyers, the younger buyers, prefer to work through the computer versus working with people in essence. So e-commerce is taking off. Portals is also gaining a lot of momentum. Portals with customers, portals with vendors, as a very efficient way to communicate and stay in touch with one another. And obviously we're seeing that being on the cloud is very much a mainstream option versus 5-10 years ago is kind of new. Cloud is just the way the business is done now. Now, the second aspect, which is hybrid work environment. 5 years ago, most people hadn't really heard of things like Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft Teams. Unfortunately, fortunately, in the last year, we've all become very well versed in all those platforms. As a result, we have seen the worksite and remote strategies are taking on new importance for many people. Companies, employees all realize they don't have to be in a cubicle, they don't have to be in an office to do what needs to be done. And it's really freed up a lot of different things. And this isn't just for the 8 to 5 person, this is from the executives on down. This is affected, and as that has happened, what does is it drives the next bullet point, which is talent. Historically, manufacturers really competed for talent within their geographical area against other manufacturers in that area. With the hybrid work environment and the digital transformations that are going on, that's no longer the case. Someone that used to work in California can now live in Idaho and still do the same job for the company or for another company at that point in time. And what we're finding in recent survey says, as we come out of COVID, 40% of employees are going to be testing the job market as their goal is to pursue a better work-life balance. And as they look into doing that, one of the key draws, one of the key things will be, does the new company or does their current company have the tools it takes to be successful? Do they have the information that they need so they can achieve that work-life balance? Now, underpinning all this is integration. How do we have the information for the people to do their jobs efficiently when they can't go next door to talk to somebody, when they're on their own? Is it there? Is it at their house? Is it for the mobile, etc.? So integration. Now, there's different ways to go about integration. And one thing, you can kind of go a custom route, or what's called a package integration process, or a PIP. And this is defined by Gartner. And Gartner defines a PIP as a predefined application integration designed to automate and standardize typical business processes that require the integration of multiple applications. A lot of words. In essence, instead of doing a custom integration, it's prepackaged, it's pretty much ready to be loaded, and you as the user do not have to do much information. And what we're seeing as these become more onto the marketplace, in 2020 is a little over 20% of the market. Gartner is projecting by 2023, it's going to be well over 60%. And what's driving that is the ease, the cost, and also the realization that either you need to do it to be ahead of the competition, or unfortunately, you're playing catch up because the competition has done the integration and you need to be doing that as well. Now, Gartner has also evaluated the pros and cons of the PIP activity. And we'll talk some more about some of these later. But first of all, they got the may require significant customization work or may be unfit for highly customized differentiating scenarios. Maria will talk a little bit about those later. You also have a risk of a vendor lock-in. I guess our view on that is once you decide to integrate, you have a couple of different ways to go. You can go a custom integration, in which time you'll be locked in with a custom vendor with your one-off integration, or you go with the Pip Creator, who will have hundreds of installed customers, and that will be their focus. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll talk about some of the positives in a little bit more detail. First of all, there's a faster project completion time. Able to deploy integration work faster and deliver return on investments, and quickly consolidating the best practices. And that's really accomplished by the fact that you're not building a new integration from scratch each time. You're able to take it where PIPs are able to take it and be installed and pretty much ready to go with little integration. Second, dependability. They're built on years of experience and understanding the requirements between the two ecosystems. And due to the business structure of Pip creators, who really rely upon subscription and managed package revenue streams, your future use of the Pip, the long-term success of a Pip organization relies upon the dependability, relies upon it working day in and day out, and you staying with them. And the next you get to is the ease of scalability. PIPs are designed to be installed across an organization, but it's designed to handle larger organizations, not just small ones. And by the use of a PIP, a lot of them are designed that recognize and leverage the various system limitations so that they can maximize and optimize the integration. And of course, it's designed for it to be repetitive and to be easily installed as you acquire new businesses, expand overseas, and have to access new databases. It's very easily to have that done. Next up is trying to facilitate self-service integration. And what the goal there is for the PIP provider to allow the user to do some work in-house on that to manage certain non-business critical functions on site. And the goal there is to give as much power as possible for the user to actually adjust what's going on if there's any hiccups. The benefits to the Pip Creator is actually allows the Pip Creator to focus on macro issues that can be transferred into future improvements, future versions, thereby continuing to make the product better and better. And finally, the ease of software management. The fact that the Pip Creator controls it and it's supported by a set of integrations with full lifecycle. You have a team of specialists that focus on this product, that PIP, for many organizations. They become experts in improvements and making it so that the different versions continue to move it forward and improve it. So I've talked a little bit about the advantages of a PIP in general. Our PIP is called Duet360, OneOffice Duet360. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Maria, who's going to spend a little bit of time talking about our particular PIP and how it works within our system. Maria?
Awesome. Thanks, Martin. So yes, we talked a little bit more on the background, what we see on the market, how we got to that journey, how we got to the product. Now I want to give you a little bit more of a in-depth what Duet360 is, what we offer, and how it fits in the PIP structure, which quite honestly, even I, before last year, didn't even know that PIP existed as a concept, and let alone that we are actually have a PIP our own. And I think, as Martin said, last year, less than 20% of the market was used by that or even new terminology, but it's rapidly growing, and we expect a huge growth over next following years. So now let's talk about Duet360. And as Martin walked us through some of the general concepts, I do want to dive in a little bit deeper on the product level. And again, if you have any specific questions, please feel free to type them in. We'll make sure we cover that. But when we talk about Duet360, our main, or one of our main goals, as Greg mentioned in our timeline and our history of endowments in general, we started working with Infor integrations back in 2012. So way before we introduced our own product, we've been working with some custom solutions. We've been working with some to-a-point pre-built solutions, but we saw the same kind of trend. We saw the same requirements over and over, and our main focus is manufacturing distribution industry. So that risk that you saw on the previous slides, that you can go too wide, you can have a wide cast a wider net, you have like challenges because you don't know all of the solutions. So we kind of narrowed that risk, if you will, because we are already narrowed our focus. Manufacturing distribution industry, that's what we're focusing on. And Duet360 was built, first ERP we ever integrated from Infor was actually Infor Syteline, CSI, however you want to call it. They changed the name, I think, on a yearly basis now, but that was our first focus. So Duet360 was initially built to integrate Salesforce and Infor Syteline specifically. With that said, again, our goal was to kind of, take that complexity of our customers, but also simplify life for ourselves. There's a lot of Salesforce vendors, there's a lot of Salesforce partners who do a lot of Salesforce work, but we saw a need to kind of have that connectivity because, you have your sales team on the front end, but they always get questions from customer. Hey, what's the status of my order? What's the status of my shipment? When can I get it? Or do you have, can you give me a price or a quote or things like that? And they always, traditionally, you would have to go back to call, to email, to go to the next office next door while you were in the office. Right now, it's a little challenging, but you have to spend your time kind of internally on that, just that internal communication. And our goal was to take that or simplify that for the customers. And we saw it as a requirement from our customers, but there are many others. So what we hear from our current customers, from people we talk to, is that up to 80% of the requirements are actually covered with Duet360. And that was achieved by, having our expertise in integration, having our expertise in the manufacturing distribution space, having our consultants with a lot of background on their own. So all that kind of been consolidated in the product, and we continue to maintain it. We continue to release new versions. As we mentioned, our most recent version was released, or major version was released last year, with a lot of great enhancements there. Now, in terms of fast completion time, right? When you talk about integration, and they usually kind of the approach is, oh, it's a complex, it's going to require time, it's going to require resources. Not in our case. So that was other kind of a bullet point, if you will, requirement. We didn't want to spend a lot of time on something we know is, needs to be reusable. So in general, our projects, if you're looking to just kind of install, have a setup, have integration up and running, and I'll show you more of what you get with that setup, but 6 to 8 weeks, that's pretty much a standard timeline for us for those out-of-the-box integration projects. Are there more complex ones? Of course. Are there more simple ones? Of course. But I would say 6 to 8 weeks, that's where we kind of sit, like with a more conservative end. And when we talk about custom integration, we actually did some comparison, and even from our experience, it will take months, right? You go for pretty extensive discovery phases, you go for a lot of build phases. So we're talking months, and 3 months is you're lucky. Usually it goes way longer. So this already kind of shows you a big differentiator. And the other part is again, we have a lot of built-in processes in product. It's not just that we take your one object from one application and connect it to another. That was not our goal. Everybody can connect things, right? There's a lot of tools on the market. There's a lot of, you can go into Google, figure out how things work. But that was not our goal. We wanted to make sure the product not just kind of connects easily, but also provides value to customers, right? And they see that it helps their operations, it helps their day-to-day business, it helps their teams to work better. So that's also was one of the criteria. And that's also kind of what makes it that package integration processes, not just the package integration, but there's also processes behind that. Now, in terms of software management, and I know probably a lot of you have, a lot of things are going on your plate, especially lately. I saw a very interesting article the other day that right now, kind of in this new environment, the CIO title can be interpreted to the Chief Integration Officer, and not necessarily in the sense that you work on the integrations on the middlewares and all of that, but more of that you have a job of connecting people, right? We all can be scattered in different places. Our team is, as Greg mentioned, a great example of it. And we don't see a lot of issues, right? We have great tools, we have ways of communicating with each other, and we actually spend a lot less time on like those day-to-day tasks. So it definitely increases productivity. Now, Duet360 is a managed product. So what it means is basically we handle the integration, we handle the installation. Our team handles pretty much, from start to finish the whole project. We'd always tell our customers, you don't need to have additional staff. You don't have to train anybody specifically to support the integration down the road. You don't have to, you don't require to have anybody to focus on it, right? Take time on their day-to-day operations just to dedicate it to that integration part. Nothing of it is required. In a matter of fact, throughout the project, some of our customers just give us access to their environments and say, you know what, we trust you, go ahead and do it. We'll come back when it's ready for being tested. And it works perfectly fine. We find it actually a very efficient way of doing the projects. Now there's another extreme where customers have a lot of requirements of the security, and they want to be involved in pretty much every step of the process. That's not an issue for us either. We can support all sides of spectrum, if you will. And of course, since it's a managed product, we don't monitor 24/7. We do, our team is make sure that integration is up and running. If something gets, if there's any disruptions in data flows, we probably would know before you. For a matter of fact, we will know before you. You may not even notice any disruptions because it will be fixed before you have realized something went wrong. But again, the product is very stable, so we don't run into those issues a lot, or I would say, caused by the product itself. There are other factors that do contribute to it. Of course, systems being down. There's a couple, I think a month ago or so, Salesforce was down for 4 hours, which was pretty significant and not usually happens to them. But again, those things can occur. The self-service integration aspect, that was actually really interesting. I've never even thought that we have any self-service aspects in our product, mainly because it's a managed package. We do maintain, we do installations. What self-service you talking about? But if you look at it in more depth, there is a lot of components that provide you a lot of kind of, I would say, independency from us. So a great example would be error handling. We talk in different data sets, right? We talk in different data systems. Syteline and Salesforce, they have a completely different structure. They have different names of the objects. They have, it's just two different systems. There could be errors. The users enter data on one end that could not be aligned with what the other end would expect. Let's say I enter contact information and I haven't put the whole email address in Syteline. Well, Syteline would not have an issue with that unless you have specific rules there, but Salesforce would. Salesforce very specific on monitoring, making sure the data entered properly. So if I would misspell somebody's email address, don't put .com there, forget like something, it would not go through. Well, we know that, and we do want to prevent that from, disrupting the integration. So what we've done, we have error handling console on the Salesforce site, which is available for Salesforce admins, where if any data for any reason is not showing up on one system and another, there's a place that you can go to and see exactly what the errors are, what's happening. Hey, this contact has invalid email address. Once it's corrected, the integration flows flawlessly as it should. So again, those things happen, but we do make sure that those things are captured and none of the data just go into the black box. Where even with custom integration, it's something you can build out, but you do have to think of those little things, and there's a lot of them. We spent probably more than a year to get the product to where it is today. And again, it's continuously being updated and developed and new functionality being added. Most recent release included a lot of great reporting functionality. We added bookings, billings, and backlog report, and that basically based on all the data that we have from Syteline, bringing it to Salesforce. So you have your sales data on the Salesforce end, you have your production, you have your order data from Syteline. We're bringing shipments, we're bringing invoices, all that information being available in one place. You can easily report on that. And you're not limited to only tool set of reports that come with a product. We all probably, if you use Salesforce today, know that Salesforce have a great reporting functionality, and everything we bring in is a native Salesforce object. So any field, any information you can report on. Something can build in-house, something can be adjusted in-house. There's nothing where we need to be involved. And the other big thing I would say, also kind of come across some of those points, but it's a real-time update. So we're not talking batch integration, we're not talking manually triggered integration, we're talking real-time updates. So I update record in one system, the integration triggers, it picks it up and provides that information to another system. So that's another great point that we talk to our customers, when they start thinking of integration, they try to how do I save maybe bandwidth? How do I say data storage? How do I save those things? There's no need to do that. It's all works. It's all embedded in the product, and it's all real-time updates. Unless there's specific reason, for whatever reason, you want to make it, let's say, batch, or you want to trigger those updates manually, which can be done from one system or another. But usually we see just on the record updates, we do the upserts to the system, and again, it works great for our customers. Ease of scalability. So we're talking here about Salesforce and Syteline integration. There is other applications that you may have, or even your Syteline could have multi-site configuration. As Greg mentioned, we have team in Europe. We do have international customers who have, different locations. They have, different countries in one system. With Duet360, you are able to connect it, first of all, to one Salesforce instance. So all data for all different data systems can be put into one Salesforce, which is, again, great for reporting. Salesforce has a great ability to hide the data. So let's say, European team would see only things they have. There's certain territories, everything going to be in place. Your executive teams would have a visibility across the board. But again, it's not a limitation for us. I think the most sites I've seen in my kind of history would be 18 Syteline sites, again, across the globe. And we did integrate into one Salesforce instance. And I believe it took us about 3 months to do so. So again, a little more than 8 weeks, of course. That's, there's a little more complexity. But again, we're not talking kind of a year-old project. So 3 months that the systems were up and running. And one part is scalability based off the, adding new systems, adding new endpoints. The other part would be adding more data. So let's say we start with a smaller set of data, right? You start, let's say, with a couple objects and then expand on that, or your company being expanded. So your order volume increases, your shipment volume increases. So that doesn't really affect the integration element as well. So we did, for example, a test with initial development where we took 10,000 records and compared different tools we used at that time. So with the Duet360, 10,000 records took 3 minutes to process, to upload them from Syteline to Salesforce, just for integration. With other systems, it took about 3 hours, and it's pretty significant difference, I would say. So even if you increase this for certain days or certain periods, you have a high period like summer or winter time or whatever it could be, again, doesn't impact the software at all. And of course, updates and upgrades. So we built the product in a way that we do not depend on system upgrades. I know a lot of customers, info customers today, upgrade from on-premise to cloud solution, cloud-based solutions. You get the versions upgrade. We do support all of that because we do most of the work in the middleware part. Updates and upgrades doesn't really impact us. Usually the functionality being added, not, you not usually have functionality being taken away from products. So if there is a need to add functionality, we can always be involved, but those upgrades, Salesforce does the 3 upgrades a year. If you go removing systems, we don't really get impacted. And last but not least, dependability. Again, it's in our best interest to make sure the product works. So we spend time on improving it and not maintaining it. That's the first place. But of course, when it was built initially, we did a lot of research, our team did a lot of research, I should say. We used pretty much all the industry standards. We used APIs for the integration on Salesforce side. We use pod XML messages on the Syteline side as an info standard, and we do actually integrate to more info products. So Syteline, as I mentioned, being the first one, we expanded to pretty much whole their suite of ERPs, be it mFreeze, be it LNs, distribution. So pretty much whole scale of info ERPs. And the product Duet360 is built to be able to support customization. So as I said, you're not only locked into integration between Syteline and Salesforce in the first kind of place, but also if you have custom fields, if you have UDIs in Syteline, if you have additional things you do like CPQ solutions, the product is very flexible, so we can add it easily. It's just a matter of making sure we have the right information, we have the right mappings, and we can add it as a part of the project. And then data loss. I mentioned that Salesforce fiasco. I don't know. They recovered since last month, but they had their system basically nobody could access for 4 hours, right? And of course, that does come with integration. We had issues. None of our applications we have connected work with Salesforce either. But none of our customers lost any data because we use inbox and outbox tables. So any updates that happen on Syteline or Salesforce being stored in those tables. And if system is not responding or if there's no acknowledgement coming back, it just sits there and it waits for it to be, to be able to process. So yes, for those 4 hours, you don't get any data flowing, but once it's back up and running, all the data being updated. So there's no data loss. There's no, it's just there. It just appears with a certain delay. So that's kind of a long path around that circle, but basically, yeah, that's kind of what goes into the Duet360 as a product, and that's what makes it a PIP. And as I said, that was very interesting to learn that it actually is a PIP. Now, we talk a lot, about objects and fields and things like that. So one of the great great thing we heard from customers that 80%, right, the requirements are already covered by the product. What does it mean? So what you're looking at here is this is a standard, let's say, base that out of the box integration that we offer. As you can see here, there's a lot of objects on the master data set and then transactional data. And we have the Salesforce and correlating info objects. As I said, they have some discrepancies in names, but we make sure we align them with a product. For example, you see accounts, customers, and contacts information flowing both directions. The reason being we want people to be able to update them in both systems, where ship to and bill to records or products and items. Usually we see a system of record as a Syteline. You want to have one system of record for object to make sure there's no discrepancies, that there's no errors or anything like that. So it's being maintained in one system, but it's being brought in for visibility to another. So bill to information, right? It's usually pretty sensitive financial data. We make sure, none of your Salesforce users can mess it up, if you will, cannot update anything there, but they do have visibility. So they know exactly, what location the customer is at, or how many locations they work with that they can ship to for a customer. Items and products and pricing. This is something is usually being maintained in Syteline, and we just bring it information to Salesforce. And no matter how complex your pricing models are, we can pretty much accommodate all of it. So because we want to make sure it works for your processes. Transactional data. Yes.
Maria, excuse me just for a second. I want to make sure that Chris has sufficient time to share his slides, and I know he's going to cover many of these same points. I love this picture, and I love talking about bookings, billings, and backlogs. I mean, I want to see it. I can't say it 3 times in a row quick enough, without messing it up. But I would suggest, I know the next slide talks a little bit about our products, which maybe we can save for last if we have time. I just want to make sure that Chris has enough time to share what he's intends to present today.
Absolutely, Greg, and thank you for. I know I can talk a long time, but that's
passionate. I love your passion. I mean, this is such rich information to share, but so I greatly appreciate it. But
yes.
just
So
time right now.
I understand. So, well, maybe one more thing to point out is, and I'll reveal the next part of it, but we do have, so we base products, which we support just, the kind of base functionality of Salesforce, but we also have, extensions. If you are, let's say, adding service to Salesforce, so you have field service done in Salesforce, or you do it in Syteline, but you want to expose the data to Salesforce. So again, we have all those kind of flows pre-built and part of the product, which can be extended. It can be done in the first place, or it can be extended as the next phases. So pretty much, yes, a lot of details here. And I'll pass into Chris in a second, but if you have any questions or interested to hear more, talk me longer about the object model, would be happy to connect with you. And I think we can jump through this a little bit, but again, Salesforce has a lot of great products. They expand their product features. So we do support them, and we can talk about it more later on. So
yeah, so Maria, if you go back 2 slides real quick, I'll just kind of do the quick recap piece here. One more.
Yes.
Just keep in everyone's mind, you can see how many different bots there are that are going back and forth and API calls between Salesforce as I'm talking later. And then in Maria's next slide here, just kind of around the coverage of Salesforce in and of itself has different modules of e-commerce and field service lightning and other things like that. And so just keep this in mind. So if you could go to my first slide. Some of you guys might not know JBT. I saw in the attendees list, there's some people I know, there's some people that are perhaps newer. I just haven't had the opportunity to meet. So about JBT. So JBT is a global company. We have 3 divisions. We have a protein division, which helps customers like Tyson and Pilgrim's Pride and a bunch of others, cook, fry, freeze, prepare, and kind of satisfy the world's hunger and try to help solve food problems. And then we have diversified food and health that gets into some of our, in container sterilization, delivery of stuff, a lot of food and some health in there. And then we have an aerotech division that does like ground support equipment and jet bridges. And across the world, we operate in Europe, we operate in Asia Pacific, Latin America, we have a branch in South Africa and a heavy presence in the US from the East Coast to the West Coast. We've got about 7,000 employees worldwide. And we have 2 shared service centers, one in North America and one in Europe, that help with accounts payable, AR, financial month-end closes and such. And so it gets to be a pretty complex organization when you have to deal with, VAT over here, intercompany transfers, the way we sell our equipment, whether that's new equipment, which might be overtime projects, or aftermarket that's more ship and bill, or service that's using other products where we're going into the field and helping with assets. And so when you look at all of it, we typically run into issues where with Syteline and other ERPs, of which we have, I think, 15 or so different ERPs, a very large amount of Syteline, a little bit of LN, a little bit of MoveX, which is the old M3, some SAP, some JD Edwards, kind of, you name them, they're sprinkled in there. And when you do all that and you have this complexity, we're not only using a lot of software. So I know some people only use like sales orders and Syteline. We kind of use everything. And then in Salesforce, we're using multiple modules too. And so having partners that can help us do a lot of this stuff is important. So if you can go to the next slide, Maria. I wanted to just give a minute to give you guys an idea about how we think about the business. And so as products are kind of flowing through our business, right? We go from sales where we're having customer engagement or quoting and CSRs or intaking orders in that B2B environment. And then a lot of our stuff is engineered order. So we're deciding, okay, well, what parts do we need? We engineer those, we hand those off to buyers to procure the parts, or perhaps they go directly to operations to be made, right? We manufacture them, we ultimately fulfill them. We have our shared service centers help us with our month-end close and cash collection. Finance closes the books. And then we have field techs actually working across all these countries, servicing these machines, whether it be, aftermarket driven, or perhaps it's an operating lease and we're helping to fulfill that. And so when we have Salesforce and when we have an ERP like Syteline, what we find is we're using those products in different areas of this flow, right? And so when we have that, we have a lot of integration points. You can imagine all the data. So Maria's slide earlier, where we saw all those BODs, when you have a lot of integration points, different little pieces, that creates a lot of risk, because one misstep on your data or where a trigger is located or anything else like that can cause you some problems. And when we have processes that cross these areas, so hey, that operations data needs to sync back to Salesforce so someone else can see it. When we ship something, we want to make sure they can see it in Salesforce so that the CSR can respond. When the CSR updates something on the order, we want it to go back in the ERP so it'll do something. Those require big multifunctional teams. And so a lot of times that's challenging. And I'll tell you, it was frankly even more challenging during kind of the last year that we've all gone through with the pandemic. But arranging people for those multifunctional teams can be costly. It can take a lot of time, and you just sometimes end up with delays because of availability. And then when applications cross, so like you're starting something in Salesforce, it's ending in the ERP, maybe it's starting in the ERP, going to Salesforce, or it's bi-directional. Those get really complex. And so you have to really pay attention to your data. You have to make sure your process is really taken care of. And so all of these things, when you're talking about a lot of ERPs or trying to get ROI out of something, it can make your project really risky and big. And so that's where we kind of looked at imbalance and all those points we talked about before. So when we originally approached it, we were kind of like, okay, well, we want to do these things. And then talking through the project and seeing everything and looking through those BODs, we're like, oh, that's already thought about. Oh, we weren't even thinking about that for like another year, right? Because we were making an evaluation. How do we do this? Do we go and do we build it ourselves, or is there someone in the market space that can fulfill this need for us and kind of accelerate our entire project timeline? And so that's ultimately kind of what we want to talk about here is how that's been beneficial, so that something that could easily have taken many, many months for us was able to get done. Kind of, we were able to actually add scope to the project so that we could get more in there on our first wave of implementation. So if you can go to the next slide. So for me, I've been going to the Sun conference for a long time. And, I've presented a few times, and what I always struggled with as an attendee and other stuff was like, sounds good, like the PowerPoint slides, what's really going on, so that I can make sure I'm not getting burned here. And so just a couple things to think about. So in Salesforce, on like the account side and stuff like that, there was a lot of things thought about that I guess when we started the project, we didn't really know how it would work out. So it was like, oh, okay, well, you have customers and you have ship to addresses and you have vendors and, and kind of everything else in there. And so with the customers and ship tos, how do we make that match Salesforce? And so there were already thoughts about, well, we map this object to this object. We create these custom fields so you can recognize the difference. How do we deal with getting the quote and then converting the quote and everything else like that. And that was really reassuring that we could actually see, oh, okay. Oh, now I see why that structure is set up that way. And that was a lot of stuff that might take, an internal team a few weeks, because you kind of have to think about the process, and then you have to go back and go, okay, well then how are we going to put the data in there? And then you kind of do a wireframe and you say, okay, well, then it'll look like this. Does that seem okay? Yep. Okay. But a lot of that was done. So we could kind of get a really good head start in knowing exactly how it was going to look, and kind of get the rationale of why it was done that way, because they knew the product. So if you can go to the next one here, where we're talking about orders. So it was the same thing on the orders. This is one of those areas where we wanted sometimes someone had a session a couple of years ago about some of their worries around how quickly you can get information back to a customer and other things. So on the order side, a lot of times it might be nice to surface orders in Salesforce, whether you have people have direct access, or maybe your CSRs are in here, or even your salespeople or your field service, right? Somewhere they're interacting with the customer, and there's some nice 360 views here. And so for us, we were able to kind of bring this to light faster because it was all mapped out. And so then you can start to show your customer exactly what's going on, where someone has something right at their fingertips in the field on a mobile device somewhere that says, oh, okay, well, here's exactly what's going on with this order. Yeah, it shipped, whatever we need to pass on. And then the part that really worried me is, and Maria kindly moved on for me there, is the multi-site configuration. So there was this part in the back of my team's head that was like, sounds great. Have you done Syteline SIMS model? Have you done this, that, and the other? Can you handle the cloud? Can you do stuff? And what ultimately really helped us was working through and getting kind of the very back end. What's happening? How are you storing stuff? Are you using row pointers? Yada, yada, yada. And there was a very logical way that each configuration got set up. And that was ultimately what gave us a lot of comfort. Hey, how are you going to know it is that ERP? How are you going to keep accounts separate in here? How are you going to know that this ERP order, even if they have the same number, it's not going to overwrite both of them over on the other side? And so that was really well thought out, and going through that back end really helped us. That was kind of our proof in the pudding. So if you go to the next one, Maria, and I'm going to keep clipping along here so we have time. We had another portion in JBT where we wanted to go from this idea where we had processes that were in PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, Visio, flowcharts, and they were all stored in OneDrive. All our accountants love to put processes in Excel. And then we would go from that. And what we did was we started standardizing into a Visio flowchart that would outline your process, Word document, work instructions with screen by screen interactions in a training environment. And then as you start to go into SaaS ERPs, we're putting those into the actual ERP. And Endowance was really helpful on this because they already had the processes. It takes a long time sometimes to write out all your Visio processes and your Word instructions, but they had a starting point so that then we could very quickly mock those into our formats, and then they can actually help us, develop that documentation, which I think makes a fundamental difference in your end user experience and your employee onboarding. But having that expertise to be able to give us a head start there really saved us a lot of time. So if you can go to the next slide. So I guess, in my last 3 minutes, what was the evaluation prior, and why did we ultimately go with Endowance, right? And so when we looked at it, we said, our team, if we started out, we had a team that knew Salesforce really well. We had a team that knew Syteline really well and other ERPs. But in order to do any of these integrations, we would always have to get them to talk together. And it would be a lot of meetings, right? And there was a certain amount of learning curve you would have on both platforms. But having Endowance there, they really did prove to be kind of an expert of both. So they knew both systems. And so it really broke down the barriers to make sure we were starting from like a strong foundation, and saved us a lot of time. And then we also said, with the amount of bods and everything else, we were going to do kind of everything that Endowance could do. We could either do just a few things, or we would probably need a PM and probably a mini project. And so that was going to take time and money in order to accomplish if we wanted to get that much done kind of internally. And then how did we need, how did we need to create these processes and document it? So we have a very detailed process documentation, and it takes time. I think it's well worth it. I strongly suggest it, but how can we make that faster, right? And so they were there with processes already, and we may change one or two things in the process to satisfy some regulatory requirement somewhere, exactly how we wanted to work, but we had a head start because it was already there. And then development and internal capital was expected to be high if we had to develop all these things. I mean, you can imagine writing every single one of those integrations. So moving into a model like this made a lot of ROI sense. And then overall, if we would have done it internally, now we have a bunch of development that we're dependent on. We have a bunch of testing we're dependent on. We have project team members during COVID or working remotely, or just maybe your SMEs in the business that if they happen to leave or they aren't available for something, all of those things add up to a project timeline that becomes very, very risky when you're trying to extract ROI out of moving projects like these forward. And so it made a lot of sense for us to go with Endowance. We kind of took something that could have taken, when you're talking 14 ERPs and everything else, I mean, we could have been working on it for a year or two, and maybe we don't achieve the scope, but we were able to really streamline that back in. So I'll hand it back over to Endowance.
Chris, that was outstanding. Thank you so much for the depth of what you covered. And the one thing that stood out to me as you were talking, and some of the points we talked about a PIP and those embedded processes and things that need to be covered in our day-to-day businesses. Some things we take for granted, we do them so often, is that you're our customer, and Martin was a previous customer. You have business requirements we need to satisfy. And I would say for those that are on the call today, you probably have internal users that are fairly demanding when it comes to the business requirements that they put in front of you. So you take, the technology is pretty solid, and we welcome you to test that. But we move the discussion forward into the business aspects of what you need to accomplish for your user base. So I thought you did an excellent job of covering that. Can't wait to see you at our next CAB meeting. Looking forward to that. Thank you very much. So we do have a few minutes for Q&A. While we're looking at some of the logos that we have as customers, some of them you may recognize. Of course, JBT up in the upper left-hand corner, and others, many representing our CAB team members today. We'll give just a minute or two for some questions to come in. And of course, if you do have a question and didn't come up with it in time, Maria mentioned you can always email it into us. We'd be glad to follow up with you. One of the things, so here's a question that just came in on the amount of we claim, and it's stated in a couple of our success stories, up to 80%. One customer said up to 85% of their business requirements were basically covered out of the box. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, but the question really is, how do you successfully accomplish that? So I would put that, Martin or Maria, would you like to address that one? I guess it's Maria. You're the lucky one, Maria.
I'll get the talk more. So I guess it's how we make. If I understand the question correct, is how we how we ensure that those the rest of the leftover is covered.
I think the intent is to say, how do you cover? I mean, that's a pretty strong claim. 85% covers an awful lot of what businesses would need, right? So how do we actually claim to cover that much of their business?
I think a lot of it comes from, again, experience and kind of like just the journey we went through, because you start with you start somewhere. There's a starting point for everything. And as we were working on more and more projects, like with manufacturers, everybody's business is different. No question, right? Everybody have a different kind of processes. Everybody handle things differently, but there are some similarities. And for example, the object model that we have, all of those objects are pretty much the same across all of them, right? you have orders. You may have different information on the order, but it's still an order. You have shipments and invoices, right? You have a different ways of capturing them, maybe different types of, fields and pick list values and things like that. But again, the baseline is still there. And especially for Syteline, it's an ERP that's, built specifically for manufacturing, and ERPs in general tend to be more industry focused, where Salesforce, you have, a lot of flexibility for customizations, and they have a lot of products in the Salesforce pool where you can utilize for your business, but the baseline is still pretty much there. It's still the same.
Yeah.
I hope it's a long answer, but I hope it kind of makes sense on that.
Well said. It was the broad brush, and I think that's what everybody wants to hear. Hey, one final question. I know we have just a couple of minutes, and Chris, let me ask you this. This is about Salesforce. I know many of the prospects we speak to are in that decision point. Salesforce versus other CRMs. We chose Salesforce as an integration point because they are the largest CRM system in use today. You made a move to Salesforce. What drove your decision to Salesforce? And I think it was already in-house prior to the integration project.
Yeah, so that comes from our commercialization team, and they evaluated a lot. Salesforce is a market leader, and we actually we've had some install of Salesforce for quite some time, and so kind of as a platform that would work well for JBT, it expanded, and we grew that relationship. I think when it came down to it, we said, there's some front end stuff that Salesforce can do, and then ultimately, how do we leverage both our Infor investment and our Salesforce investment in a productive way? And so I think ultimately what we came away with was bringing them closer together and making sure we were moving data effectively and in all the places. Like Maria's slide had, where it's like 25 places. That's when the efficiency of our business can grow, because the people that need specific tools that each software platform offers allowed us to make their lives better kind of on a day-to-day basis, as well as make everything more transparent. I mean, I don't think anyone wants to have, tell your salesperson you go here and you need to go to the ERP to check this other thing. And sometimes they're between firewalls and other stuff. And so this is the focus on harmonization, right?
Yeah, and you make a good point. The number of the variety of users you have in your environment. I think the other thing that we integrate well with are the other components to Salesforce. You can bolt on a service solution, e-commerce, which Martin mentioned. Many of our installed base customers are now moving in that direction, where they're bringing in a portal for their partners or for just their customers for either support or purchase of e-commerce items. So really good response to that. Thank you. Well, look, we're out of time. This has been, from my standpoint, a really informative webinar. I hope you all feel the same. And once again, thank you, Chris, for sharing your late morning hour with us. We do appreciate the presentation and the information you shared with everybody. And Martin, Maria, as always, love working with you. Thank you for your contributions today. And with that, I'll sign off and say have a great day, everybody. We look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.